Welcome, everybody. Ann Hayes, aka Mama G, here. I empower women through sacred sexuality to become fiercely fulfilled. I am the co-creator, co-founder of Fiercely Fulfilled Feminine. I say co-creator because I got the divine in the mix with me. I am not doing this alone. Now, we have a very interesting topic today, and it's taken me a bit to get to this because I'm going to be a little bit vulnerable here, and I'm doing my best to bring neutrality into this situation. See, I'd like to speak to the overexpression versus the repression of one's sexuality. Okay. Yes, I'm going to touch upon sex addiction, love addiction, which I believe are two sides of the same coin. I am going to talk to what has been termed a vanilla lifestyle, and I'm going to mention the BDSM as well as sexual trauma and share a little bit of my own personal experience. I'm being super vulnerable here. Now, I did start by saying my intention is to bring in neutrality. You see, we live in a dualistic reality right now, a dualistic dimensional reality. And so there's going to be a continuum, and there are going to be different perspectives, okay? Just different degrees of whatever it might be, like temperature, sexual expression, whatever it might be, okay? And in the middle, we have balance and we have harmony. Now, what we've come to on the planet right now within our collective consciousness is it looks as though we are reaching extreme polarities. However, it's an opportunity to bring these to the surface, to learn from each other, to grow and evolve with each other, and then to come into harmony and unity with all of it. Okay, so the key is to be open-minded, not to judge, because here's the deal. Whenever somebody comes from a place of judgment, and I've been here and I can still be there in different ways, it's either due to one of two things in my belief. Number one, it's due to unhealed trauma. Number two, it's due to programming. Yep, family, cultural, societal programming, either unhealed trauma, programming, or both, like it was for me. Okay, for me, it was both. Okay, so let's talk about. I have notes here because this to me is a heavy topic, and it can be, and I'm going to try to do my best to come from my perspective. It is First of all, I just went through, I mean, I get stuff that comes through to me. I believe that is divinely channeled in. The way I know I believe it is divinely channeled in is because of the way it comes and in the state that I'm in when I receive it. Okay. So then I can trust the source, especially when the source is coming in with neutrality and is allowing me to see what I believe is an expanded perspective around all of this. Okay. So let's start with overexpression versus repression of sexuality. And so my title here is Harmonizing These Polarities on the Sexual Continuum. Yes, we're talking about sex. Okay, we don't talk about sex enough. I'm going to back up a moment here because now there are two primary ways. There's a third way, but I can only think of two right now to control the population. Number one is you control the narrative. That's pretty understood. But the second one, most are not aware of because most are ashamed to talk about sex, at least openly and publicly and with a great deal of vulnerability, which I'm doing more and more, is you hijack somebody's sexual energy. And if you can do that on a global scale, on a grand scale, you can control the population. You see, because sexual energy has the power to either destroy, deplete you, or it has the ability to heal you, transform you, and to allow you to manifest with the divine in the mix, the kind of life you desire. Obviously, it allows you to enjoy pleasure as well. There's a lot more to it, but that's not where my focus is today. Yet the importance is the free flow of sexual energy, free of inhibitions, with the ability to be able to explore in a healthy way. For me, it involves an emotional depth with that brings the divine in the mix with true intimacy so that one could truly enjoy the pleasure and the beauty of that connection and that experience. Okay. So I haven't had that experience yet. I've called it in. I would love that. And yet that's the experience that I am personally looking for. And I think most are. I think most are. So let's get to it. So we have overexpression of sexual energy and we have the repression of sexual energy. And I'm going to tell you, neither one is healthy. Okay, neither one is healthy. So overexpression has sometimes been termed as hypersexuality and sex addiction even. Okay, hypersexuality is just when there's obsessive, thoughts about sex, just constantly thinking about sex. And sex addiction takes that a step further. And I'm not going to go into all the different ways that sex addiction can show up, but it's literally in addiction to sex where one is objectifying others, and the goal is to literally enjoy the orgasm or the dopamine fix that comes with engaging in sexual activity. And I'm just going to take it to there. Okay, so there's a thin line between what becomes a sex addiction and what is just simply a healthy expression of one's sexuality, because that can be very subjective in nature. And only the one, if one would wants to do some honest self-reflection, one would be able to figure that out for oneself. Okay. And then the repression is just what it says. It's like you have these, and that has different degrees as well. It's one who has these sexual desires that involve kink. So I'm going to throw the BDSM a little bit right here, but that's not what my focus is just yet. I do not want you to associate kink with overexpression. Okay. Is it possible within the community? Yes, but let's not associate the two. Okay. Because that is not necessarily true. Okay. It is not necessarily true. So let's be careful with that one. That's an assumption that people make. It's a stigma. It's a program. Okay. Let me get back to it. So repressed sexuality is inhibiting certain sexual desires out of fear of shame, or how is one going to be perceived if they express the kind of desires that they would really like to partake in. And consensuality is important. I don't know if I've made up a word, but consensuality is important, which of course exists in the BDSM community. So I'm going to get to that because I keep referring to it. And repression, celibacy and repression are not the same thing. You see, conscious celibacy with the intention of elevating spiritually is one thing. However, over time, when one is not conscious and one is operating from unhealed trauma and fear and not feeling safe of connection, that is very unhealthy. That is repression, repressed sexuality. And I'm going to tell you, I've been on the hypersexual spectrum of it, and I've been on the repressed. I've been on both ends of the spectrum. And for me, both were very unhealthy expressions of my sexuality, because I have experienced sexual torture, sexual trauma as a child. And I have to be honest, I was programmed. Maybe I should wait, but yeah, I'm going to wait on that. And so I had very unhealthy expressions of my sexuality. And I didn't see it when it was happening. I thought it was very normal for the way my sexuality was showing up. And I thought it was very normal for the way I was interacting and relating with others in relationships regarding my own sexuality. Okay. And it's the same thing with the repression of it. At one point, I thought it was normal. And then I realized at one point it was not. I was operating from unhealed trauma and fear. So overexpression and repression of one's sexual nature, in my opinion, are both different expressions of the same trauma. So I'm going to break that down. Okay. So it's important that we recognize this and see this so that we can take the shame out of it, so we can stop judging each other, because shame does not heal. Shame does not heal. Those who've been through sexual trauma or any type of trauma already have enough shame. There was carried shame, and then there's the shame on top of that. I have a whole video on dismantling the core of shame around sexual trauma, so you can check that one out. Okay, so let's look at it. Overexpression versus repression. Both are about control. Both of them are about control. Let me control this interaction and this connection so that I feel safe. So that I feel safe. Okay. If I control the situation, okay, I can control the way I interact with others. If I just focus on the sex and there's no true intimacy and there's no emotional depth, then I'm safe. So objectifying another person with regard to sex is not necessarily something that is a conscious intention. It's more like a subconscious need, actually, that says, I want that connection, but I'm afraid of the intimacy because I'm afraid it could get hurt. It comes from a core wound, typically of abandonment. Whereas for the repressed aspect, the core wound is typically rejection. Abandonment and rejection, if you ask me, are the same thing. They're the opposite sides of the same coin, same trauma. Okay. So literally, same core wound, different expressions. So both are about control because with the repressed sexuality, it says, okay, I can control things because if I'm not even engaging in sex, then I'm safe. See, the control is about keeping one safe. It's about fear, the fear of true connection, of true intimacy. Then we have, so with the overexpression, it's kind of pushing out that energy, pushing it outward and trying to control the environment and others. It's kind of, it's a push outward and can become one that is performance driven and one where there is a false empowerment. False empowerment may look healthy, depending on how that shows up. Like, look at me, I've got all these rewards. I've got the best wife there or husband and there is in the world, or the best spouse or partner, because look at what I, oh my God, I've got this family, I've got this career, I've got this and that. Except if there is still unhealed trauma, that false empowerment is going to eventually take itself outside of that committed relationship, if in fact there is a committed relationship. Okay, because there's going to be that unhealed trauma and potentially uninhibited desires related to that trauma that are not going to be addressed. Because if somebody's not able to share their deepest desires, then that means they're not willing to be vulnerable. And they're going to go elsewhere to get those desires fulfilled without really understanding why those desires need to be filled. And like I said, I'm not sharing this to shame or to judge. It's just what is. Okay. Now, on the other hand, repression is about pulling in the energy. It's pulling things in. Okay, I'm going to hide. I'm going to keep myself invisible because somebody feels disempowered. So instead of the false empowerment, it is a disempowerment. And it looks very, very different because one is a lot of sexual activity, a lot of sexual promiscuity. Like I said, I've been there. A lot of people who've experienced sexual trauma have been on both ends of the continuum. So I can speak to both ends. And then you have the disempowered. However, they both come from a sense of powerlessness. You did not have the power to either control the trauma that you witnessed happening to somebody else in your household. It could have been a mother, it could have been most likely a mother, okay? Or you did not have the power to control somebody abusing you or harming you in a sexual way. So it's a lack of a sense of powerlessness. Same sense of powerlessness, although it might be more readily observed and seen in one who has repressed their sexual expression. Okay, then we have escapism. Happens on both ends of the continuum. You see, escapism, avoidance. Okay, I'm going to escape from my pain because it's too painful to feel. It's too uncomfortable. I don't want to feel it. So I am just going to escape. I could escape through drugs, alcohol, shopping, overeating, whatever addictive habits people partake in, okay? And that's a form of escapism because you're distracting yourself from the pain. And I've been there too. Okay, for me, it was overeating. And you look at me and you're like, how was that ever possible? Yeah, Mama G, because yeah, I probably had what someone would consider anorexia. However, I never threw up, and I always ate. So I probably would have been bulimic, but here's the thing. I could not throw up because of my trauma. The idea of going to a toilet to throw up was just too traumatic for me because that was directly connected to my trauma. So I was like, no, no, I can't have the puke come up. I couldn't do it. So what I did, what I would just eat like a pig and exercise like a fiend. I would just put dance music on. And if I ate like ice cream, I would dance. And this was well like early 20s. Like I'm well beyond that, well beyond that. But that's how it showed up. I had body image issues, believe it or not, even though I've never been overweight. I had emotional overweight, emotional baggage. Okay, so escapism also exists when it comes to repressed sexuality. Okay, so escapism may be, or avoidance. Obviously, you're avoiding sex and you're avoiding any kind of connection. You probably escape, just you retreat from the world. That's what I did at one point. You just retreat from the world. You don't want to go out there. You start saying, no, I'm good. You want more solitude to eventually it becomes loneliness. You retreat from the world, and you might continue to find escapism in other ways that might be perceived as more healthy, but they're really not. Like just traveling, okay, traveling, exploring new places, or just always keeping yourself busy, like overworking, overproducing. Like it was really easy for me to just like, since I have my own calling, my own business, to just work every day. Get up, you know, uh, okay, I might as well just work. It's the weekend. I might as well work. It's Friday night. I might as well, because I got to make it happen. I was in my toxic masculine energy, toxic feminine energy. I was like, I got to make it happen. So I overworked. Escapism, avoidance. Let's see, what else? Here's one. Overexpression, repression of sexual energy is the eventually over time one becomes disconnected from their body, disassociated, disassociation. It happens on both ends of the continuum. You see, if you are objectifying somebody and you are engaging in sexual acts and your only desire is just to enjoy the sex and the pleasure of the dopamine hit without any true connection, without really looking for a true intimacy or love, you eventually become disconnected because you end up all in your head. You're not in your heart. You become disconnected from yourself. Become disconnected from others, and you eventually become disconnected from the source of your creation. And that can lead to an intense depth of loneliness and depression or feeling of depression. And that is because what happens is no matter how much you engage in sexual activity, the more you engage, the more you realize that it's just your dopamine levels, you need more. That's what addiction does. And now I'm going to speak specifically, not just the overexpression of sexual energy, but the addiction to sex, which it's a real neurological condition. There's actually a change in the neurochemistry where you need more, or you need something that's a little bit more outside of the borders of morality, I guess is the best way that I can say it, at more of a thrill. And it might not be outside of the borders of morality. It just might be an extra thrill so that you can get that dopamine to hit the way you want it to because you don't want to plateau. Okay. So that is the disassociation, the disconnection from the body and from one's true authentic self. And the same thing happens with one who has repressed their sexuality because it's the same thing. When your sexuality is an integral part of who you are. And I'm speaking from experience on all of this. It's an integral part of who you are. So if you're repressing that, you're repressing the creative life force of the universe. You're repressing your ability, first of all, to enjoy pleasure in the way it's meant to be enjoyed. You're repressing your ability to connect and to be intimate and to be loved and to relate in a healthy way, which is an expression of the divine. Love making, in whatever way that may look, consensual, intimacy, true depth and vulnerability, and being able to express one's desires and with healthy boundaries. That's the most beautiful expression of the divine that you can experience, I believe, in this plane of existence. We're not here to get rid of sex. We're not here to say no to sex. We're here to bring it in the middle, to make it divine, to bring heaven to earth. Okay? Because they talk about the seven sins. A sin is not a sin, it's not evil, it's just the opposite of living. It's simply a misalignment. It's a misaligning. So lust could be considered a sin depending on how it shows up, if it depending on the intention and depending on whether or not it is aligned with the divine. The same thing with the repression of a desire, which is lust. In the same way, the lust is still there, or at least the desire for sex is still there, but when it's being pushed down, one cannot experience heaven on earth. Either way, it's not going to happen. So again, the disconnection happens is because sexual intimacy with emotional depth and true vulnerability, and like I said, the ability to truly express one's desires, is seen as potentially a danger zone. One doesn't want to be shamed. One doesn't, I don't know. One doesn't want that, they want to feel safe. They don't want to jeopardize the connection, which could potentially be a relationship. Okay. And that comes from both unhealed trauma and societal programming. Okay. The other thing is you have, let me see. Okay. I guess I'm just going to mention quickly that repressed sexuality sees the body as a source of pain. If you have experienced sexual trauma, you may not, on a subconscious level, you have associated your body as a source of pain. Okay, it's like, for example, somebody who's experienced sodomy. And to me, anal intercourse is different than sodomy, because anal intercourse is just another expression of one's sexuality. It is a major erogenous zone in the body. Okay. And however, to me, sodomy is, and that's just my definition, is when it is forced, when it is aggressive, when it is against one's will, when it is coming from aggression and control, like an adult on, or an older person on a child. Okay. And so somebody who has experienced sodomy may initially associate anal intercourse as a source of pain, when it could actually be a source of very healthy pleasure, in my opinion. Okay, so then we have, what happens is we have, in both the overexpression and the repression of sexuality, we have a bounce between pride and shame. So the overexpression is like, okay, okay, look at me, like I'm a sex god or I'm a sex goddess. Like I am great at sex. And that may very well be true. Okay. And that's okay. But then what happens if there is unhealed trauma coming into it, because intention is everything, and there is any level of a downer after, because, like I said, of the intention, then there could be shame that comes into play. And so it's bouncing back and forth between pride and shame without really knowing what's going on, because there's so much distraction from the pain of the unhealed trauma. So with the repression, okay, the addiction comes about in a love addiction. And I didn't even know this was a thing. And like, instead, what the person who eventually becomes repressed, or it could be overexpression as well, because I've experienced love addiction with an overexpression of my sexuality, is you cling on to a relationship, because if you can express yourself sexually with just one person in a committed relationship, then you feel safe. One feels safe. And so, okay, now I can explore, except unhealed trauma. What that does is it does not leave space for the relationship and the connection to breathe. It becomes clingy and needy. And the person with love addiction puts all their worth into their partner. So instead of seeking external validation the way somebody with an overexpression of the sexuality does, they're looking, for performance and external validation. The one who is in the degree on the continuum of repressed sexuality is looking through love addiction. You literally fall in love. You believe you're in love, and it's not real love, but it's going to feel like it. It is literally a dopamine fix. It's a dopamine fix until it's not anymore. Because what happens is you put all your ability to be happy onto that one person, and they can't breathe. And they're going to walk away, and they're going to cheat, and they're going to betray, and they're not going to know why they're doing it. Both come from unhealed trauma, okay? But that's what happens. It's energy. It's the dynamics. It's push pull, sex addiction, love addiction, sexual betrayal. Sexual betrayal of oneself is what it is. So that's where it's sexual betrayal of oneself is what sexual betrayal truly is about. I had to learn that the hard way on my journey, okay? Because I was that love addict and I was cheated on in a big way. And it was very painful for me because what I realized is I needed to heal. I needed to heal. I was an addict and I didn't even know it. Okay. Um, Okay, so then we have, so in a sense, there is manipulation going on there. There is manipulation. There is manipulation by the one who is overexpressing their sexuality, who is not ever going to truly be able to commit to a relationship, not in a way that's going to allow for true depth and intimacy. And then you have the one with the repressed sexuality is also manipulative because they're manipulating this person because they're offering them, oh, here I am, this wonderful person, and look what I can offer you and give you. And maybe they're beautiful and seductive and what have you. And they draw in this person. And then they realize, oh, this person is like an alley cat in a back alley that hasn't been fed for days and has been kicked around all scrawny, you know, digging around the dumpsters. Okay. How about that purring pussy cat? Okay. That pussycat that get a little wild and untamed and erotic, okay, in a healthy way. Okay, both come from a lack of self-worth. Unhealed trauma often has a lack of self-love and a lack of worthiness at the deepest levels, and yet it's not readily recognized until one is ready and the divine timing shows up to help somebody to begin to heal. Okay, so like I said, overexpression of sexuality and repression of sexuality, you can see how they're all common. I've just shared all the commonalities. The only difference with, let's say, for example, let's take it to an extreme, sex addiction, when it expresses itself in a way that harms others. I don't mean like consensual, like BDSM practices, okay? I'm talking about when you harm others um, without consent. I'm trying to think of the best way to say that. Like an adult with a child, or like what was happening, like, or you drug somebody, you drug and rape somebody, or you enslave somebody and you know, they become your sex slave. Okay. So that's different. Okay, so now let's talk about BDSM. I almost feel like, oh my goodness, like I've already covered so much already. I should probably do a whole nother, I'm just going to keep going. Okay, here's the thing. First of all, I believe that every practice, every aspect in society has both a divine aspect and an inverted aspect. And it's all about intention. Okay. So BDSM, do not associate that with hypersexuality. Do not associate that with sex addiction. Can hypersexuality and can sex addiction exist within the BDSM community? Absolutely. It can exist anywhere. But it's very important. I want to impress upon you not to make that correlation or that, because that's programming. That's not having enough understanding or awareness about what kink in the BDSM community is about. Remember, we're here to harmonize these polarities. We're here to harmonize them. And I'm not saying BDSM, yes, there's a different polarity. Let's talk about BDSM as a sexual practice versus the term vanilla. Okay. And to me, this is an expression of what maybe many people over here would like to engage in, or at least some of the practices, and haven't felt safe enough doing that or vulnerable enough doing it, because the belief is, okay, here's the thing. I feel like there's this honesty on both sides. I'm now looking at BDSM versus the vanilla style of sex, which is, if you look at a heterosexual couple, it's missionary, okay? Just for the purpose of, okay, let's have sex, boom, 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 we're done, okay? Both exercise, I believe, a certain degree of dishonesty. Because if you're working, for example, as a professional dom in the BDS community, or if you're somebody who is visiting a dungeon or a studio, okay, then it appears, at least this has been my observation, my research, and what I've observed is that it's secretive. There's a lot of secrecy around kink. And in other words, I've talked to men who go to dungeons and their wife doesn't know it, because they feel like that's a way to preserve the marriage. And for me, that's a justification for something that's kind of crossing a boundary there, and it's dishonest. It's dishonest. And that's more about the fear of that husband being open and vulnerable, and the fear of losing that relationship, and instead of being their authentic self. They are not their authentic self by going elsewhere. I'm not saying else. Like if they go to a gym and the wife said, okay, I don't think I want to explore that, but guess what? I want to allow you the freedom to explore that with others. That is a mature, healthy person who gives others the freedom. Now, over here, in a quote unquote vanilla relationship, there could be that person, the wife or the husband, let's not make assumptions here, who has these desires and dreams and fantasizes about it, and is in a sense repressing these desires because they're afraid if they share that with their partner that they will be shamed and that they could potentially harm the relationship. Those all come from fear. It comes from dishonesty. It comes from not being one's authentic self. So harmonizing those is about healing. It's deprogramming and healing. It's deprogramming from societal norms. It's healing whatever aspect of yourself that believes that you can't be your authentic self and you can't be vulnerable enough to share what your true desires are, especially around your sexuality, which has the opportunity to be extremely pleasurable and as well as healing. Do I believe that the BDSM community offers an opportunity for healing? Absolutely, 100%. Again, it's about intention. Are you doing it to make money, to dominate and control others because you have unhealed sexual trauma, and this is how it's showing up? Or are you showing up as somebody who truly wants to support somebody else's healing? Are you there, coming from the heart, showing up, loving your job, doing it with balance, because you're being led from a heart-centered place that recognizes the importance of helping somebody to reclaim the sacred sexuality and to help them to express their sexual desires in a healthy way? Sacred sexuality doesn't mean it's free of kink. Sacred sexuality means that you feel vulnerable and safe enough to express your sexual desires and that you can engage in a consensual relationship where there's deeper emotional depth and intimacy because you feel safe enough to do that and you feel vulnerable enough because you've healed enough to do that. And you know that if somebody's going to walk away and have a problem with your desire to sexually explore, that's not on you. You will automatically call in and bring in those people who are willing to explore with you sexually in a healthy way. So here's the thing. Okay, so I say let's bring the soft serve twist mix together. Okay, if we can just bring chocolate and vanilla and bring it together and harmonize those polarities, it would be so great. Okay, so I mentioned the shame, the fear, the programming. Okay, here's the programming. Okay, those within, this is, and again, this is research. This is not personal experience right here. Is that those who do engage in kink, okay, or BDSM activities, some, from what I understand, are afraid, excuse me, believe that they cannot have emotional depth or intimacy and still engage in kink activities or BDSM activities. Okay, that's a belief. That is a belief. Okay, there's also from the vanilla side of it, there's a belief that if they, and again, this is talking to others, if they express their true desires, they are going to destroy that relationship. There's fear there. There's shame. Again, that's due to societal programming and that's due to unhealed trauma, one or the other or both. So the key is the intention, healing, and deprogramming dualistic views or expressions and harmonizing these polarities. That is what we have the opportunity to do on the planet. And I believe that I'm a big part of that. So this is a lot for me to do this right now. It's a little bit uncomfortable for me because I know that people are going to watch this and may potentially judge me, my own family, my own children. But guess what? I don't care. I really don't. I'm here, like I said, to bring neutrality into these polarities and to help to harmonize them, to see all perspectives, to be vulnerable about my own experiences and to be honest. Okay. I'm going to tell you right now, initially, when the BDSM community first popped into my awareness, and this was years and years ago, it triggered me because it triggered my deepest trauma. And I'm going to share very quickly. And that included torture. That included strangulation, suffocation. And that's as far as I'm going to go. There's a lot more to it, but that's as far as I'm willing to go. And so that's, for me, it was the unhealed trauma. And of course, societal program that looked on the outside in and said, oh my God, no, no, I can't, I don't want to be a part of that. And yet there was another part of me at one point because of my trauma said, you know what, I know, and this is what I used to teach some of my like my clients, like this is a long one, desensitization. I remember, and I'm going to wrap this up soon, I promise. I remember volunteering for the Department of the Youth Services, the correctional system, juvenile correctional system in Boston, Massachusetts, USA. And I was volunteering in this detention center, and there was a teenage boy who had murdered a teacher. I was a past teacher, right? Like it was a graphic murder. It was a nationwide case. And I'm not going to share why I was sitting there with him. There's obviously a staff person with him. We were sitting side by side. And there was part of me in my mind, I'm like, I kind of wish I could ask this staff's permission to have this young man put his hands on my throat to know that he can do that and he's okay and that I'm okay and I'm safe. Except guess what? He had too much healing to do, and so did I. But that thought came to me, and that was years ago. And so, do I see the value and the way that healing can happen within the BDSM community? Yes. Do I also see the way pleasure can happen? Okay. So I'm looking at anyone who's been sodomized, anyone who's been raped, anybody who's been choked, anybody who's been left for dead. I know somebody who was left for dead. She was a child, raped, and this adult left her on the ground for dead. So you can only imagine what she's experienced, okay? And then, of course, she's from the South, evangelistic territory, the Bible, ba, 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 okay? At any rate, sexual exploration, if we could just take the time, this is what I'm going to encourage you to do. If any part of what I've shared today has triggered you, it was meant to. Either it's validating you, or it's triggering you. Okay, if it's triggering you, here is an opportunity for you to do a little bit more research, for you to continue to heal, to keep an open mind, and to keep evolving. Okay, so I've talked about primarily it's sexuality. I've talked primarily about the over expression of our sexuality, the repression of our sexuality, again, as two ends of the same continuum, and both expressions potentially of the same core wound. There might not be a core wound there. It could be just programming, or it could be just expression. Remember, there are sexual archetypes. So not everybody is going to be like, if you're an air sign, you're into the gentle touching and whatnot, and that's beautiful too. But there are earth signs and others like, I'm a Leo, I'm passionate, I'm going in. That's just who I am. However, I've also learned that I can balance that and be more, right now, it's more present with myself and bring in some of that air energy and kind of explore all the different elements. Earth signs, it's rough and raw, and there's nothing wrong with that. So it's being mindful of all the different archetypes. And like I said, there's a lot of nuances. I could share a lot more, but polarities and how polarities like create, erotic tension and increase sexual pleasure. Like I could go on and on. Here's the deal. I'm going to stop there. Okay. One more thing. Is it an addiction or is it an unfilled desire? Take some time to reflect. Why do you desire what you desire? Why are you repressing your desires? Okay, because either way, it's not healthy. Okay, think about what your intention is. Does it feel good when you're done? Because in my opinion, a healthy exchange should not have what do they call that? Top drop or something, a dom drop. I'm not sure. Okay. And a real healthy exchange with true emotional intimacy and presence, I don't believe that should happen. That's my opinion, though. I may be wrong. I am not an expert on the BDSM community. I'm not claiming to be. This is just conversations with others, research, and my own personal experience. Okay. I'm just being real to the real, raw and vulnerable. So again, I empower a woman to reclaim their sacred sexuality so that they can become fiercely fulfilled. You see, we're meant here to experience a fulfilling life in every way, bringing heaven to earth, repressing your sexuality, overexpressing your sexuality. Yes, you can overexpress that out of need, out of unhealed trauma. None of that is healthy, and it will not truly fulfill you. It will not sustain itself. Staying in the material world without the divine in the mix will not sustain itself. Without love in the mix, without true intimacy, without emotional depth, will not sustain itself. I'm calling in the ability to be able to sexually explore in a healthy way where I have somebody where we can share our deepest desires, our trauma, our vulnerability, our pain, and be okay with that. Okay. And I'm not even going to get to polyamory real quick. I'm not against it. I'm not saying it can't be a healthy thing, but for me personally, because of my own trauma, I haven't even gotten one relationship right first. I would like the opportunity to get a one-on-one relationship where love is in the mix and there's a commitment and a loyalty and a devotion. I'd like to get that done first and get that right. and then take it from there if it's meant to be. Anyways, that was a lot. I didn't really talk about what BDSM was, but I think most of you, if you're in the real world, you know what it is. So again, this is Annie Aka Mama G, and right now, so if you feel like you would make like support, especially right now, you're going through some intense stuff, you've experienced sexual trauma, and you're either overexpressed or repressed, especially if you're at a place where you're repressed and you're disconnected. I can help you to reconnect in the quickest way possible, in the most significant way possible, so you start to feel more fully alive and you start to feel more connected and you feel more safe and you can trust to open up again. Because without that, you're never going to truly feel fulfilled. So if you feel depleted, lackluster, like what's the point of life? Like I want this beautiful relationship, but I'm not even enjoying self pleasure. Then come see me. Come see me, okay? I'm going to drop a link in the comment, a couple of links. I'm going to drop a link to a free quantum strategy session where we can map out how we might be a good fit or not. Okay, map out a plan. Or you can go straight in. You can schedule what is known as an active assistant session, okay, where you invest. I can literally on the spot tap into your energy, and within the resonance of my own healed light codes, I am going to be able to give you some viable action steps and some powerful insight to really help to accelerate your ability to open up and reclaim what I call your sacred sexuality and to access a greater free flow of your sexual energy, because it is truly connected to fulfillment and is actually directly connected to manifestation. It is the creative life force of the universe. I love you so much. Thank you for tuning in. Please share this with anyone who you believe may benefit, and I'll see you soon. Much love, much peace.